Hey guys, so we're now going into the second part of this. I'm going to try to get through this quickly. There's parts to photosynthesis. Okay, so there's two parts to photosynthesis. So this is photosynthesis, and they are the light-dependent reaction, which means they depend on light or sunlight to work. These occur in the thylakoid, okay? And then there's a light-independent reaction, meaning sometimes called the dark reaction. Because this part of photosynthesis can occur without light. And we're going to go into those right now, okay? I'm going to show you the light-dependent reaction first. And in order to show you the light-dependent reaction, we are going to look at the thylakoid, okay? So here, is the thylakoid membrane. And in the thylakoid membrane, let's just get rid of this. Looks kind of. In the thylakoid membrane, okay, you're gonna get what I call a photosystem. So this here is a photosystem. There's actually two photosystems. This one is a photosystem 2, and this here is photosystem 1, right? And photosystem 2, right, I'm going to show you something. Has these chlorophyll molecules. So these are chlorophyll, and these are pigments, and these chlorophyll pigments reflect green, okay? But they absorb all other wavelengths, okay? And so you can see these chlorophyll pigments are what makes up these photosystems, okay? So photosystem 2 is made up of these chlorophyll pigments. Here's chlorophyll pigments in photosystem 1. Just don't get confused because photosystem 2 comes before photosystem 1, right? And that's just because photosystem 1 was discovered first, so they called it 1, and then photosystem 2 was discovered after, so they called it 2, but they left 2 before 1. So photosystem 2, a photosystem is just a cluster of pigments, and you can see like the cluster of pigments here is the chlorophyll pigment, right? And this here is actually a special pair of chlorophyll, and you can see that each photosystem has this special pair. So there's a special pair there, there's a special pair there, and this pair is special because it contains 2 electrons, okay? That's what makes it special. So all the other chlorophyll pigments I call like accessory pigments, so they're not as special. And here's that here too, like there's accessory pigments here. They're not as special as like these special pair of chlorophylls here. And like in between the chlorophyll is a electron transport chain, okay? So these are the, these are the electron transport chain. Okay, and you saw the electron transport chain when we did cellular respiration before. Now also in the thylakoid membrane is the ATP synthase, okay? So I want you guys just to make sure you understand what I'm looking at here. This here is the thylakoid membrane, okay? Okay, so don't forget that the thylakoid is found in the chloroplast, and the thylakoid is made up of a thylakoid membrane and the thylakoid lumen inside is that. So the thylakoid membrane is what contains photosystem 2 and photosystem 1. So basically, like, remember, here's a stack of thylakoids that make up a granite. I'm drawing the thylakoid and I'm making it bigger, and I'm just drawing like this part of the thylakoid, right? So I can't even show you going it all the way around. I just don't have enough room, but I am showing you what's found inside this thylakoid, right? The membrane of the thylakoid, the lumen of the thylakoid, and that photosystem 2 and photosystem 1, they're found in the thylakoid membrane. So is this ATP synthase, and so is this electron transport chain, okay? And that the photosystem is made up of these accessory chlorophyll, which are not as special as the special pair of chlorophyll, and then you have a special pair of chlorophyll in each photosystem, right? Anyways, I hope you get that. So what I'm going to show you is what happens, okay? What happens to this special pair of chlorophyll, okay? Important to note that inside the lumen is water. Okay, so don't forget, like, you watered the roots, right? And when you water the root, the water actually travels up the root to the leaf, to the chloroplast, into the thylakoid, into the thylakoid lumen. So that's where you want the water to end up, right? In the chloroplast, inside the thylakoid lumen. And that the sun is beaming down on this plant. And when the sun beams down on this plant, it's beaming down on the leaf, into the chloroplast, into the thylakoid. And what it's doing is the sunlight is hitting these accessory pigments, okay? So here's the sunlight hitting these accessory chlorophyll pigments. And these chlorophyll pigments, these accessory chlorophyll pigments, they just have one function, and that is to direct the light to this special pair of chlorophyll. All these pigments, right? These pigments, right, function. So these chlorophyll pigments function to direct the light to the 2 electrons in the special pair. That's why we have these accessory pigments. And eventually, this special pair gathers all this energy, becomes more and more and more and more energized. And because it's gathering all this energy, right, because all these accessory pigments are directing the solar energy towards the special pair of chlorophyll to these 2 electrons, it eventually jumps and goes into the electron transport chain. Okay? So now you've lost these. These are gone. These 2 electrons have gone, and they have jumped to the electron transport chain. They jump, and as they jump, right? Remember, when they lose electrons, it's called oxidation. And when you gain electrons, it's called reduction. So you can see, like, when this protein in the electron transport chain loses its electrons, this gains it, this is undergoing oxidation, this is undergoing reduction, and then these 2 electrons eventually rest, and they rest in this special pair of chlorophyll. Okay, so do you think they have low energy, these 2 electrons, or high energy? Well, they're low energy now. They lost all their energy as they jumped through the electron transport chain, right? So they lose energy as they jump through the electron transport chain, right? Now, why? What is the point of having these 2 electrons jump through these electron transport chain? Because this energy that they lose is used to pump hydrogen. Okay? Now, if this is the lumen, this would be the stroma. And stroma, remember, is the fluid that surrounds the grana. So that's the stroma, right? And this is what you have to know here, is when the electrons are jumping through the electron transport chain, they're being used to pump hydrogen from the lumen, so hydrogen from the lumen to the stroma. Okay? So that's what the 2 electrons are doing. Okay? So again, these 2 electrons gather all this sunlight. They jump through the electron transport chain. As they jump through the electron transport chain, they lose energy. And this energy is used to pump hydrogen from the lumen to the stroma. Now, where did this hydrogen come from? It came when we split water. So water splits to form this and 2 electrons. Okay, now how does water split? So water splits when sunlight hits it. So all of a sudden, sunlight is hitting this water too. And because of all this energy this water is absorbing, it splits to form this H positive, right? So each one of these waters is splitting to form all this hydrogen as they split. And not only are they forming hydrogen when they split, they're also forming oxygen, which we breathe, okay? You and I breathe it in. So the water that's in the plant is actually where our oxygen comes from. The sunlight split the water, the oxygen is released, it comes out of the plant, and you and I breathe that in. It came from the splitting of water, and only plants have the ability to split water to make oxygen, which is critical for us, right? Not only that, right, they also make 2 electrons which actually replace the 2 electrons that we lost here. So these 2 electrons go back. So when you split water, and the splitting of water is called photolysis. Photolysis means we split water. How do we split water? We use sunlight. When we split the water, it forms this product, okay, and 2 electrons. The products of splitting water is oxygen, H positive, 2 electrons. This same thing here. When we split oxygen, we get hydrogen, oxygen, 2 electrons, okay? This is what we get. The hydrogen that we make is pumped into the stroma. The oxygen we breathe in and the 2 electrons are used to replace the 2 electrons we lost to the electron transport chain. Okay, now why did we pump all this hydrogen? Well, we pumped this hydrogen, right? Because we pumped all this hydrogen because you're going to see why we pumped this hydrogen in 2 seconds, right? So we're making all this hydrogen inside, and when this hydrogen travels through the ATP synthase to the stroma here as well, guess what we make? We make ATP. And ATP is a high energy compound that we make when hydrogen passes through this ATP synthase. We make all this hydrogen. Now, why is all this hydrogen, right? What do we need it for? Okay, well, I'll tell you, because there's an energy carrier. Just like NADH that you learn in cellular respiration, we have another carrier of energy called NADPH. Okay, so this NADP, right, becomes NADPH, and it carries high energy electrons. Well, what high energy electrons is it carrying? Well, guess what? Here's sunlight hitting photosystem 1. And all this energy from sunlight is being transferred to these 2 electrons. And these 2 electrons become energized. Okay, remember they were low energy, but these chlorophyll pigments re-energize this. And these 2 electrons that are energized jump to the NADP. And now, hey, guess what? This NADP becomes energized NADPH. Right? So all this hydrogen that I pumped, right, to the stroma is being used to make NADPH. Right? All this hydrogen, NADPH. And the NADPH is a high energy electron carrier. Okay? It's carrying high energy electrons from photosystem 1. Now, I know this looks a little bit much, but I think you guys should be able to get it. Okay? So just very briefly, photosystem 2. 2 electrons in photosystem 2 get energized, travel through the electron transport chain. They lose energy, and the energy that they lose is used to pump hydrogen from the lumen to the stroma. These 2 electrons that are now in photosystem 1 are not very energetic. But guess what? They get re-energized when sunlight hits, right? All these chlorophylls right here and right here and here transfer the sunlight energy to these 2 electrons here. These 2 electrons get re-energized, and these 2 electrons go to NADP, which grabs onto the 2 electrons and grabs onto a hydrogen to make this high energy NADPH. So now I produce 2 high energy things, ATP and NADPH. And remember, this ATP was produced because I have all this hydrogen in the lumen, okay, I have all this hydrogen in the lumen that moved down the concentration gradient from high concentration to low concentration, right, to make ATP. And there you have it. That's the light-dependent reaction. Remember, this whole reaction is dependent on light. It's the light that excites the 2 electrons. It's the light that splits the water. It's the light that re-energizes the 2 electrons. And these 2 electrons that still contain the light energy is now housed or held by this NADPH molecule. And this ATP synthase was able to produce ATP because of the hydrogen that was accumulating in the lumen. And the only reason why the hydrogen was able to even be produced in the first place is because sunlight was used to split water, and water produced hydrogen, oxygen, and 2 electrons. Okay, so that is a light-dependent reaction. I hope that helps. And then my last lesson will be on the